What's up, everybody? Once again, it is I, James, coming to you from the Nerdy Mewzings podcast studio. I am here today with Mr. Josh Derstine. How you doing, Josh?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks so much for having me on.
It's going good, and I probably messed it up. Is it Derstine?
It's Derstine.
we even talked about it, and I still messed it up.
Yeah.
See?
Everybody gets it messed up, so.
It's because you second guess yourself, right? You think you got the way it's supposed to be said, and we end up messing up. You even told me, you said just like Frankenstein, right?
Yeah.
There we go, man. Awesome. Well, listen, I've been excited to have you on. Like I was telling you before, you are my first rising star that I'm featuring on here, and wanted to get you on and give you this platform and hopefully get you even more exposure than you already have. I mean, I know you already got a pretty big following coming up, like pretty quick. I think I've been following you since you were about 16. I think that's when you really started out. I think you had a different username back then on IG, didn't you?
Yeah, the Art Jedi.
That's right.
My old username.
Yeah. I liked your email too. You had Jedi in your email. I'm like,
Yeah, it's funny because now everybody asks me for my email, and that's the one I use for everybody. So if it's like a professional thing, I give them Jedi Rebel 9.
love it.
And,
I was like, I already like this guy. We already have Star Wars in common.
right, yeah, exactly.
Yes, sir. Now, judging by your age, you probably are more of a fan of the prequels, right? Is that your Star Wars, what you came up with?
My Star Wars in particular is the Clone Wars TV show.
Love it.
Revenge of the Sith. That was my jam as a kid. That's still my favorite movie.
Nice. Very good stuff. Yeah, a lot of the new stuff coming out, I think it's kind of like, it's just cool to have more Star Wars. That's kind of my opinion on it. Like, even if I don't particularly think something is spectacular, because we're always going to be going back and comparing in our brains to those feelings we had when we were kids, when we were watching Star Wars. So I think we get a little flawed kind of look at things. It's never going to meet our expectation. But have you been enjoying any of the new shows? Anything you've been watching?
I really enjoyed the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. And I like some of the animated stuff that they're putting out. I think it's pretty interesting.
Like the Bad Batch stuff?
Yeah, Bad Batch. I think the interesting thing with a lot of modern Star Wars is that it's all influenced by Star Wars, which sounds kind of weird. But when you look at what George Lucas was doing when he made the prequels, he was pulling from old movies, and obviously the original Star Wars was like World War II and a bunch of different stuff. Like, George always pulled from a bunch of different sources, and now with modern Star Wars, it's like they're only pulling from Star Wars.
That's a very, very wise observation. Yeah, I definitely can see that. It's definitely being influenced by itself, and in the creators that are working on it, obviously, were people coming up on Star Wars, so that's going to be their frame of reference when they're trying to make something and trying to recapture a lot of that feeling for people. They're trying to recapture that same feeling that they had as kids when they were coming up on this stuff.
Yeah, but usually what winds up happening is you can only get the nostalgia factor, and it's it's almost impossible to bring anything like brand new.
Yeah.
And that's why when they actually try to experiment with stuff that's different and that Star Wars hasn't done before, I think that makes for some of the more interesting content.
Definitely. Did you enjoy Rogue One?
Yes, I thought Rogue One was great, and I'm a big fan, obviously, since I draw comics. I like cinematography
Nice.
quite a bit, so I like what that was like my introduction to Greg Fraser, and he's gone on to do a bunch of the cinematography for the Batman and Dune and stuff like that. So
He has a really good eye.
yeah,
Definitely. I love all the stuff you just mentioned is spectacularly filmed for sure.
yeah.
So we're talking about film and obviously our love of Star Wars. I'd like to know a little bit about how long ago you started drawing. Like, when did you first start getting into comic book artwork? Has it been ever since you were just a little kid?
No, actually, well, I've always liked drawing. I always thought the idea of taking a piece of paper and creating a universe on it was like the coolest thing. So I've been doing that since I was a kid. I didn't really get into it until after The Force Awakens came out.
Okay.
And I went to Barnes and Nobles, and they had this art book called The Art of The Force Awakens.
I think it's over my shoulder over here. It's somewhere in there. There's a whole Star Wars section. Yep. I know which one you're talking about.
When I was 11, I didn't have a clue what concept art was, but I opened it and it was like, it was Star Wars, but it wasn't, because it was all the ideas they didn't use. And that was the coolest thing to me. So I was super into that for a long time. And then eventually I got into comics because of Star Wars. The main thing I was reading was Darth Vader by Charles Soules.
Oh, yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that one, I love that series. That's still one of my favorite series. But I didn't actually become interested in drawing comics until, and this was a very specific memory, was when I picked up, I believe it was Venom #9 with the dog on the cover.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Was that a Ryan Stegman one?
Yeah, Ryan Stegman.
I love Ryan Stegman, yeah.
And that cover, for whatever reason, stuck out to me, and I was like, I want to draw that stuff. And so ever since I was 15, I've just been working on comics and trying to get better at doing comics. So
That's awesome, man. So you got started a little, maybe a little later than some of the people I've talked to on here. They were like, drawing on their parents' walls when they were little kids, stuff like that.
Right. I mean, that's the interesting thing is you get a bunch of different guys. Everybody starts from different places, but Ryan, me, and Todd are all very similar in the fact that we got started fairly late.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty unique. Yeah, with Todd, he was like into like formal like graphic design and stuff like that. Like he came from a totally different background, and obviously like a lot more cartoony stuff. If you look at his really old stuff, like little cartoon characters and stuff like that, it's really cool to see how his styles evolved over the years. Like when I worked for that comic book shop, the Spider's Web Cards and Comics here in Washington State, one of the things, and people get sick of me telling this story over and over, I'm sure I'll end up telling it like 100 times, as this podcast keeps going, but on my lunch break, I would go in the back room where we had all the back issues, and it was where he stored his original art pages. So there was literally gigantic brown paper bags full, stacked on top of the shelves that had the comic boxes on them. And so every giant shelf had stacks and stacks and stacks of brown paper bags full of Todd's original art. So from Amazing Spider-Man, his stuff on Hulk, old stuff he did on DC for Infinity Inc., like all that stuff was stored there. So I would literally get to go on my lunch break and pull one of those bags down and just sit there and look over, what is now today hundreds of millions of dollars worth of pages.
Yeah.
It was insane. So
yeah, that's the interesting thing, because a lot of artists are very intent on selling their artwork. I don't believe Todd sold any pages from the original Spawn, and
no,
it looks like he didn't sell much before that either. So.
Yeah, he hasn't done a whole lot. He held on to a lot of stuff. I think all the Spawn stuff, he wanted to make sure to save that, like to pass on to his kids and everything, and all of that. And yeah, it's really interesting. He's held on to a lot of things, like, and that's, part of it being so expensive to get a hold of anything of his is kind of that scarcity of it, along with it being Todd friggin' McFarlane, right?
Right.
So I'm just making an assumption here. You're probably a pretty big McFarlane fan.
Oh yeah, big McFarlane fan, big Image fan. I love all those guys and the sort of ingenuity of what they were doing. Like Todd really came in. I mean, that's the thing, is like Todd came into comics when Spider-Man wasn't at the top of the sales anymore. Spider-Man wasn't the coolest character in the world that we know him to be now. and he really revolutionized that. And then he went on and made his whole creator-owned empire.
Yeah. Yeah. And Toy Empire and, you know, however many other businesses he owns that we don't even
Video game.
know about, right? Like, yeah, he's such a entrepreneur. It's like so inspiring, the energy and enthusiasm he maintains even to this day with all the different ventures he's in. I know I would really love to see him get back to like drawing a book regularly or something. I know he said like as he starts to slow down, he said that's what he wants to do is just start drawing a book or something for fun and not have to worry about all the other stuff. So I hope to still be around one day when he starts doing that, because I can remember, you know, what it was like being there waiting at the comic book shop, seeing his stuff come out each week and being so excited. And yeah, I was my parents, you know, they wouldn't let me buy Spawn when it first came out because they said, oh, it's too demonic. You know, coming from a traditional, you know, Christian family, like, oh, we're not going to allow you to pick that up. And I remember being so sad because I was on all his Spider-Man stuff, and I'm like, but Mom, it's my favorite artist. She's like, nope, can't. That's about a guy coming back from hell. You can't get that one.
Right. Right. And it is interesting because before he hopped on Spawn, all of his Spider-Man stuff went into that sort of demonic realm. So.
It did. He definitely has that dark side to his persona for sure. For sure. I think that's empowered him a little bit and emboldened him in business, though. Like, that guy's got a lot of drive, and, you know, if you tell him he's not going to be able to do something, he's going to do everything he can to prove you wrong, for sure. So what type of motivation do you take from somebody like that? Being, I know I saw that you actually got to have your work reviewed by him not too long ago. And I watched that. How cool is that, man? That had to be surreal for you.
That was a surreal experience because it was just like the perfect 40 minutes where he just sat me down and told me everything I need to fix. And I've just been working on that ever since. So it was a very amazing opportunity that I'm very grateful for, because I was able to learn a lot more than maybe I would have for like a few years or a few months or whatever. So it was a very great opportunity to have that. But
now, would you say go ahead.
Yeah, Todd's a big inspiration because you have to have a very certain kind of personality to make it in comics, and you have to be very passionate for it, and you have to be very almost you have to believe in yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that's cliche, but nobody else is going to believe in you, so you have to be your own hype man. You have to be your own businessman. You have to make a name. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to push for yourself. And I think Todd is the best idea of somebody not, you know, rolling over and letting companies step all over them or letting people step all over them. And he's very inspiring in that way, of the drive and the confidence and really the motivation you need to make it in the creative department. Because if you don't advocate for yourself, which a lot of artists have a very difficult time doing because we just want to sit at home and draw all day, and we don't really want to stand up or make a name for ourselves. We just want to be left alone and draw.
Yeah.
And I think one of the best things I saw from him is I'm very introverted. I usually keep to myself for the most part, but he was saying for this industry in particular, if you are a shy, you know, not a very outgoing person, you need to learn how to talk to people and stand up for yourself. And you know, that's just something that I've learned how to do. And it's a lot easier with social media because I'm good at writing, right? So that's just writing. But the more that I've had to talk to people in person or go on different shows, I've really had to learn how to get good at, you know, public speaking and being able to articulate myself across to the viewers. So
that's great, man. And it's great that you've already learned that so early on, and that you're able to develop it now. I mean, you're young and not, so set in your ways. So you are going to be able to push yourself to evolve and grow, and you're getting this awesome feedback. And a lot of people, they get feedback like that, and sometimes it just goes in one side and out the other. And I can already tell you're somebody who actually takes it to heart and applies it, like you were saying, with not only that advice, but what he was telling you about your artwork, how you've been just nose to the grindstone with that now, trying to improve the areas that he was telling you needed to work on. And when it comes to your artwork, would you describe yourself as like self-taught? Did you pretty much, like, in other words, no formal training? Like, did you go and do a bunch of figure drawing classes or anything like that? Or has it been mainly derived from resources and things that we have available to us online now?
Yeah, well, self-taught is a very broad term, because a lot of times people will say that they're self-taught, and in reality, they've read all these books and watched all these tutorials and done courses, and that's definitely the route that I've gone. I've never done any like traditional in-person art classes. I've always I think Todd said this before, but I'm like a dog with a bone. I will seek out whatever I need to learn. I will scour the internet for what I'm looking for. I'll get a bunch of books on different things. I'll study from my favorite artists. I'll stalk them and obsess over them and find how they learned how to draw and just everything. So I'm very obsessive with finding all these different resources to learn from. But from that sense, yes, I'm self-taught.
Yeah, it's funny that term. I don't know when that term self-taught came up, but you hear it a lot when it comes to artists. And it's funny when you really break it down like that, because when you're not self-taught, you're utilizing the resources and things that are available to you and putting in the work to have that drive to go through and study and, apply these principles and techniques and everything that those before us came and put into place. So, yeah, I think when people say self-taught, they mean more, are you formally trained? Like, did you do a face-to-face class somewhere versus, nowadays... God, man, I'm so jealous of you, because I wish when I was a kid and I was into drawing, like, all the resources that are available now, like, I'm on them all the time. That's my whole YouTube is like all, of course, David Finch's channel, Richard Friend, Will Robson, anytime he puts out any kind of technical breakdown or something, like, there's so many great people to learn from and study now. Back in the day, the closest thing we had to it as far as video went was those comic book greats Stan Lee videos. Like, I have those old VHS tapes on the bottom of the shelf over here, from when I used to have a VCR. And I remember just watching those over and over, the fast forwarding to the section where they were actually drawing and trying to learn. Do you find that, is it overwhelming having that many resources now and like really being able to kind of narrow down, or is it kind of nice because you can really find the person or the style that resonates with the way that you learn and kind of dial things in from there?
I think it's very fascinating for my generation in particular, because we grew up in the digital age, which means that ever since a relatively young age, we have had access to anything in the entire world at all times at the tips of our fingertips. And nobody really talks about what the long-term effects of that could be. Mm-hmm. But I think it's very fascinating, because we're at a very different place than any other generation, because we are constantly bombarded with an infinite amount of information that we are processing and taking in all the time, which, I mean, obviously now everybody does that, but especially when you're younger doing that. And for somebody like me who's very obsessive with learning, for example, it can get very overwhelming because, and especially even just getting advice from people, because what happens when you're getting advice from people is that most of the time they're trying to make a better version of themselves. And they're trying to tell you what they would do. And what they would do may not necessarily be what you would do. So it can be conflicting sometimes.
Yeah.
And having so much access to all the resources of anything ever created it can be daunting sometimes, and I can get overwhelmed with, oh, should I learn how to do figures this way, or should I do them this way, or should I do them that way? An important thing is to have a very streamlined, and I was actually talking to this with Ryan Stegman the other day, like a plan of what you want your art style to look like.
Yeah.
You need to learn to make it look that way, and to not be overwhelmed with all the resources that are offered, and very particularly search out the ones that help you and make the most sense to you the most, which is also another difficult thing, because I'm not quite sure like what my learning style is, because I'm still trying to like discover things about myself. So it presents a very wide opportunity of things that I could be learning, and I'm like, am I learning this the right way that I need to be, or would it work better if I was doing this?
Yeah.
So it can be a back and forth process a lot of the time, but yeah.
Definitely. It's awesome you mentioned Ryan. Ryan and I used to get on Skype and like sit and watch each other draw, and he would give me feedback, and that was before he broke in and everything. And I remember I actually did his very first website for him. So I built his website, and he paid me in original art. And it was like when he had first broke in with Marvel. So some of his like, he was Magician's Apprentice stuff, and some of his really old stuff when he first broke in. So I'm still the proud owner of a lot of early Stegman work, and just always been such a huge fan. Always such a humble, down-to-earth guy, and like willing to help those of us coming up and trying to learn. I remember like probably a quarter of that bookshelf is books that he had recommended to me, and ways to, like you were saying, how he's telling you ways of looking at how you learn, and how you don't, bend your style to be just a copy of everybody else, come up with your own voice. And these were all things that he was maintaining even way back then when he was trying to find his own style. Like I remember when his style completely like shifted gears and is what we know as now as Ryan Stegman's style. Like it was a pretty drastic change. And speaking of styles, man, you have a very unique style. Like I want to say, like, it's not I do get image vibes from it. Like I like it because I love all the cross hatching and everything, all the detailed rendering. And I can tell you're really into that too. Like, man, just be careful, buddy. Like carpal tunnel. Mm-hmm. You're working those hatching lines, bro. How long does it take you to go over a piece? Like I'm looking over here at my other monitor, and I see that Wolverine piece that you just did recently. That's some of your best work to date, bud.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's the thing where I'm constantly trying to improve. I'm constantly trying to get better and to learn things. So it's like hopefully each piece is better than the last one, right? That's the sort of idea.
Yeah.
I don't actually time myself on my pieces, because that would be just too daunting for me. I'm like, oh, this is taking forever. And I mean, again, that's another thing. Like Ryan gave me like a little pep talk yesterday. But the thing is like the drawing, it takes however long it takes to make it the best that it can be. And, when you die, people are only going to remember like 5 of the drawings that you did.
This is true.
So for me, it's like, and this is what Ryan always pushes, is that you need to work it until it's right. And, so that's just what I do with all my stuff. And that is why it takes a bit longer, because I do actually spend quite a bit of time in the beginning stages to make sure that my gesture is right, my anatomy. And even with like Wolverine, like you have a very specific character who's very short and stout and wide, and it needs to reflect that, but also have a lot of energy, because with my art, the key thing that I'm trying to push is high energy with high detail. And those two things can actually be conflicting, because when you're doing all that cross-hatching, it can have a tendency to sort of remove some of the energy. So trying to learn how to keep the drawing energetic while still very detailed is a very big balancing act.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get faster, trying to get better, but I'm just going to let it take the time that it needs to. So.
Now, we need to talk about your creator-owned project, because you have, is it pronounced Amarok or Amarok?
Yeah, Amarok.
Amarok, okay. And that's on Indiegogo. You have the campaign on there and everything, and you know, people should definitely go back that. We'll definitely put the link in the show notes and everything for everybody and drive people that way. So with that, you have the benefit of, in some way, being able to take your time a little bit more than if you were like on a monthly book or something, right? So like it's allowing you that little bit of extra freedom to be able to really hone your skills and refine. And like we were talking about before we got started, about how you're kind of going back and redoing some things now with your new set of eyes and new skills, looking at that artwork. So that has to be cool to kind of be afforded the freedom to be able to do that. Cause I know a lot of people get frustrated when they break in and they're on a monthly book or something and they're having to hit deadlines and they see that huge, you know, drop off in the quality of the work that they would like to be producing. So what's it been like working on your own creator-owned book? I'm sure you've learned a ton just over the time that it's been going now.
Yeah, I'm very grateful to the backers because they've been very patient and supportive, and they have all sort of realized that, you know, I'm ultimately trying to give them the best product I can. And so redoing large portions of the book is necessary to have a consistent look for the book as well as a high quality look for the book. So I've been very blessed to have that patience granted for me. And yeah, it's been one of the biggest learning experiences of my life, because not only am I working on the book, but I'm also making sure that I'm still applying myself and doing my studies and, you know, figure drawings, construction drawings, learning from Hampton, Loomis, Bridgman, Michael Mattisey.
I love Michael's stuff. But, he's got some good stuff where you're talking about keeping things dynamic. Michael Mattisey's got some awesome stuff for that, for sure.
Yeah, the force drawing stuff, but
maybe that's why we like it. Got to use the force,
right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a great name, and when you think about drawing, really does feel like a superpower sometimes, because you're literally creating stuff from your head. I mean, it doesn't really get that much cooler, but yeah, everybody's been very supportive on Amarok, and I have had the opportunity to go back and redo things and fix things and tie things together now that I have a more grounded sense of where my style was. Last year I was very experimental and trying all sorts of different things and looking at guys like Philip Tan and seeing what they were doing and seeing how close I could get to that. And now I'm sort of going in my own direction where I'm trying to put everything together. You know, David Finch, Ryan Stegman, Brett Booth, Philip Tan, Mark Silvestri, Todd McFarlane, all those guys, to try and create something that has my voice. So. Yeah,
and when you look at your work, you can definitely see those influences, but you don't look like a clone of anybody. It definitely comes across that it's your own style. So I really think you're like walking that line of being influenced, but not being a full-on copy of somebody, which I know is a thing that a lot of people, a lot of young artists have trouble with coming up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's good to hear that I'm not a clone, because you don't really know.
You're not, because I can see a piece like scrolling my Instagram feed quickly, and I know right away it's your work.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Now with your render heavy style with all the hatching and everything, like I've noticed, like, well, I always know like the importance of a great inker to be able to interpret pencils like that and really what's the same kind of double-edged sword type of thing you were talking about? Like if you have somebody with a render heavy style and you bring in an inker here that doesn't know how to interpret that, it could stiffen the work up and take some of that energy away. Yeah. And I know you've been really fortunate to hook up with John Livesay and get a really good inker doing a lot of your pieces. Is he going to be doing the whole creator-owned book for you too?
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to be working with him. He will be the inker on Amarok, and he has such a wonderful style, and this is the kind of stuff that he likes. Me and him are very similar in the fact that we're like detail maniacs, so we kind of vibe off of each other that way. And I mean, he was working at Top Cow, so he was doing Mark Silvestri and Michael Turner and David Finn.
Yeah.
And, all those guys. So this is something that he's very familiar with. So he's able to do all this amazing line weights and cross hatching, scissor hatching, fades, everything.
It's crazy. Like he definitely brings out the best in your work, I would say. Like he really, having somebody I think it would be very important to have somebody that's used to interpreting that style of rendering. So definitely all those people you mentioned, he had a lot of practice back in the day, for sure. For sure. I'd like to do something I've never done before, especially to encourage people to check out the video version of the podcast over on YouTube at Nerdy Mewzings. I'd like to screen share and look at a little of your artwork. Would you be cool with that?
Yeah. It'll probably be a bunch of old stuff that
Well, I'm going to just pull from your Instagram. So I know at least the most recent ones might be some things that you're pretty proud of.
Yeah.
All right. Through the wonders of technology, we figured it out. We've got it shared. Definitely encouraging everybody to go over to YouTube and check out the video version of the podcast so you can see this amazing detail. I'm going to pull up the pencil version of this Wolverine piece. This is your most recent post here. Man, I'm seeing some Finch. I'm seeing some McFarlane in those hands. Yep, the kinked fingers. I love it. Yeah. That is amazing, dude. And you said you don't time yourself, so you have no idea how long that took you, but I'm betting it took a little while because that's just a little tiny piece of a way bigger page, right? Is that like a double page spread?
We actually just took an 11 by 17 board and we flipped it sideways.
Okay.
So yeah, sometimes it's harder working smaller.
Yeah.
To be more precise, but this one I really made sure I spent my time and I did all my line weights and cross hatching and nice shadows and.
Yeah, I like that holding line you put around the outside too. That's really cool. And all the rendering. I'm a nerd for rendering for sure. Right. And then I think we should look at the inked version to see how John interpreted that. Wow. That's stunning, dude. Yeah. Hey, when you first saw that, I bet you were freaking out, huh?
I mean, that's the experience, seeing anything that he shoots me an email and it'll just be like this glorious scan where he really just livens up the artwork with all the detail and the energy and the very precise cross.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look on that lat muscle, all that rendering in there is that's like the coolest thing.
It is, man. Yeah, and just how the blacks are spotted and how he pulled out the rendering. I mean, and all of that was there in your original pencils, but he just made it pop even more, which is just what an amazing inker should be able to do, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing with John. If we look at that Venom and Spider-Man, is that I can go a lot looser on my pencils, and that the Venom and Spider-Man was an experiment because I definitely tried to go looser on my pencils just to give him more creative control.
Right.
And you know, usually that's something that's very difficult for me because I have trained myself up in a way where I'm a very tight penciler if I need to be, and I can do, you know, some of the tightest pencils out there. But with John, I can try and learn how to loosen up and let him take on some of the heavy loading.
Yeah.
Really bring out, you know, because I went very loose on that cross hatching on the Venom, and you know, he can just go in there and make it very, very cool. And I mean, the thing with cross hatching is that you're trying to convey a sense of gray and fading. And that's just what John really excels at, especially if you look at that forearm in the background. If you squint your eyes, it just looks like gray.
Yep.
Because of how amazingly he softened the blacks with the.
And he works traditionally, right?
Yeah. Not only is he traditional, but he is almost entirely a nib guy. So
Wow.
he inks exclusively with nibs for the most part.
So definitely like the old Image days.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Very similar, like Bat, that Bat banning and those guys.
And this is the other part of that. Oh, here's the got Omega Red in there.
Yeah.
Nice.
Those arm veins.
And then of course we have to look at your guy. So obviously you're passionate about this character.
Amarok. Yeah, now that one actually is a double page spread.
Okay.
Back to the Image days where it's a vertical double page spread. So it's
going to open up that other way. Yeah.
Flipped, put together like that. But this is one of the coolest scenes in the book because he's sort of getting possessed here, and so
I can see you put your heart into that one for sure.
Yeah, convey all the details and all the rendering and cross hatching and making sure that all the anatomy and the cape and the pants.
Yeah, everything's solid, man. You're definitely like hitting it at another level right now for sure. As somebody who's been following you for a few years, man, yeah, I can see why you were wanting to go in and kind of redo some of the older stuff. And the older stuff was great too. I remember seeing all that stuff too, but this is firing on all cylinders right here for sure.
Yeah. I definitely jumped the gun with, I mean, because at some point you got to stop saying that, oh, I'm going to make the comic, and then you actually have to make it.
Yeah.
So I jumped into it head first, not really sure what I was doing. And so, you know, obviously that's caused a pretty big delay on the production, but
right. Well, like you said, your backers are very understanding, and I think as long as you're communicating with them and everything, and being transparent of, you know, hey guys, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and are you guys okay with this? And I'm sure that you probably for the most part have received a positive response, because at the end of the day, everybody's wanting to get your best work, I'm sure, even if it means waiting a little bit longer.
Because I had put an update on the Indiegogo page, and I was expecting some people to be mad with me, but everybody was super good, and I was like, oh, this is great, thanks guys.
Yeah.
But so that was great. But
that's perfect. I was gonna say, when it comes to your creator-owned work, now that's completely original concept to you, right? You wrote that character, like you're writing the book?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, are you somebody who was always going into being an artist with having that in your brain, that you were going to also write and do your own project and kind of, you know, follow that image comics blueprint to some extent and be able to have your own creator own title right out the gate? Like I find it interesting because you know, you're obviously very mature for your age, and I see that you're not following the traditional path that somebody new who is trying to break into comics would be, in that you're not immediately trying to get your first job with Marvel or DC. You put all this focus and energy into this creator-owned project right out the gate. So what was some of the inspiration behind that, and was it influenced by that, you know, kind of seeing what the Image guys did back in the day, and now we have all these tools available to us with crowdfunding sites and giving just pretty much anybody the ability to do it, right?
Yeah, I think the answer that I really have to go back to like my roots. So, and this is something that Dan Fraga has talked about before, but when I was younger, I was like a very driven person. Like, there's never been a phase in my life where I was like unsure of what I wanted to do, which I didn't realize that not a lot of people are like that. You know, you look at most high school classes and most of them don't know what exactly field they want to go in, or they hear something that they're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then they go to college for it without having that much prior experience or research put into it. And that always baffled me because I'm somebody who obsesses over things and puts all this research into it. So like most young boys, I was heavily into dinosaurs. I wanted to be a paleontologist. And the thing that really influenced that decision was I love the idea of imagining our world however long ago with these, you know, almost mythical at this point, beasts roaming the lands, and to be able to hold a fossil and be like, this was a Tyrannosaurus Rex or whatever. That's what captivated me. And by the time I got into 6th grade, I sort of realized that most of the job is just digging and then doing scientific research. And on top of that, you have to remember these ginormous names.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
And I was like, that doesn't sound as fun as I thought it would be. So around that period, I was always a big reader. I've always been a big bookworm. I've always been heavily into fiction and fantasy and sci-fi and different books like that. So in middle school, I was always drawing, but I really wanted to be a writer. And I really wanted to create my own worlds and my own characters, because that is what got me into drawing, is being able to put that stuff down visually. So writing is something that's always been very near and dear to my heart, because it's something that captivates your imagination. One of the issues with writing is that your viewer is not going to immediately understand. They have to actually sit down and read it. That's different with art, because as soon as you see a drawing, you get an emotion from it. You get an emotional reaction, and it's unique to each artist. So that's what interested me to start drawing. And so eventually, once I got into comics, I think comics are one of the most beautiful art forms, because it combines the written word with the drawn picture, and you can create entire books that way. So that is really what captivated me and made me want to take these ideas that I had in my head, because Amarok is something that's been with me since I was like 11 or 12, and has just been developing as I've grown and matured as a person. It's grown and matured as a series to become its own unique, independent thing. And so it just sort of seemed like the natural path to go down, especially after getting inspired by all the Image guys and all of the guys doing creator-owned stuff and making our own universes, and the fact that crowdfunding is such an accessible point of access to self-publish was very interesting to me. And I can hire different artists to come in and do different renditions of the character, because it's always like the most magical experience when you've made something and then you see David Finch draw it, Rob Willis draw it. That's such a amazing feeling. And I would encourage anybody to, as a hobby, as a side project, if you are creatively inclined at all, which I come from the belief that we're all creative people, we're all imaginative, but most of the time, a lot of us don't know how to harness it. Your body naturally needs to create. It's actually as important as oxygen. And if you don't do it during the day, you do it during the night. You do it while you're asleep. You do it while you're unconscious. You do it while you're dreaming. That's where stress comes from. That's where anxiety comes from. It's all about creating stuff in your head. And it all depends on what you're spending that creative energy on. So for me, creating my own thing was the most interesting path that I could take. And so that's why I've taken it so far. And I think once Amarok is done, I can essentially use that as part of my portfolio to show that, hey, I've done an entire book. And I can show that to editors and people from Marvel and DC, and they can get a better grasp on what I'm all about rather than just having a few sample pages, which I'm still going to do samples, of course, but it gives me a lot more credibility than somebody that's just doing samples.
Yeah, they definitely can see that you're committed and persistent once you put your mind to something, for sure. Like, you're going to have a little bit of a body of work behind you that you can show them right out the gate. Something I noticed, you mentioned that you came up with the idea for Amarok, like, probably, would you say it was like before you started drawing really seriously?
Yeah, it was one of the main reasons that I started drawing was to be able to draw the character. I mean, I didn't take it all that seriously. I really got into drawing when I was 14 and then comics when I was 15. So I had like a year before, but growing up with different YouTubers like Jazza and ZHC,
Yep.
which
Back when he used to do like all comic book art and stuff. Yeah, that was my favorite when he had his channel going down that path. But I understand why he switched it up, because you got to kind of follow the algorithm. But yeah, I loved all that stuff for sure.
Yeah, I exclusively knew of ZHC as the comic drawing guy, the comic book YouTuber that draws.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because for the past like 3 years, he's been doing like exclusively like customization stuff, and it's just a complete 180 of the direction that he's
Well, he kind of followed Mr. Beast's formula in a little bit of a way.
Yeah,
for sure.
So, but I'm very grateful that when I discovered him, he was doing the comic book stuff, and that I could grow up on that stuff. And you know, I definitely think he's a big influence on my style, because obviously he is very influenced by David Finch. So before I was really even into comics, I was seeing his stuff and being like, oh, what is this hyper detail, you know, cross hatching and all this stuff. So it was cool to have that before I officially got into comics with like Ryan Stegman's Venom run. So
yeah, I wonder if CHC is still drawing. I sure hope so.
I think he does a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, that guy's, I mean, he's so busy now, obviously hugely successful, so maybe he went down a different path, but it's always a shame when you see these people that are so, you know, motivated and have a lot of artistic talent, and then they kind of waver and disappears. Hopefully he doesn't let it go all the way, because I remember how much I enjoyed all those videos. I would like to see a ZHC comic art come back, because he had some really good work back at the time, like very inspirational stuff.
Yeah, it's funny because the name itself is like his first name, last name, Comic Art. Like,
yep.
I think it's Zach Heisch Comic Art.
Yep.
So it's funny that that's the brand name now, and he pretty much does customizations. So
yeah, and iPad giveaways and all that kind of stuff. But hey,
giveaways.
No hate, man. I know it's hard for artists on YouTube. Like a lot of people, like the craft channels, the artistic channels, like really took off during the pandemic and everything. And then as we got out of that phase, I know a lot of the creators, I know Jazz has talked about it and everything, kind of how it's declined a bit, and they're kind of trying to find their place again in that YouTube algorithm. So I guess it's probably pretty high stress. Probably easier to just go jump on what's working for everybody and change that path.
Because if you look at Jazz, he, especially when I was younger, he was like the king of YouTube in terms of art content creators. Like he was the top dog. Like he was the, you know, his tutorials and everything like that. That was the big side of YouTube. And now, because of how the algorithms changed, it's really not as impactful to the modern audience anymore.
Yeah. So your aspirations right now, obviously, from what we've been talking about, is to get Amarok finished, right? So that's kind of like, I know before we got on here, you said you hit a nap because you'd been up all night and drawing. Like, I'm assuming the whole thing's already written, though. You got it pretty tightened up as far as that, and it's just now going back and in getting those pages done that you're redoing. And how far into it do you feel like you are? You feel like you got a decent chunk behind you now?
Yeah, I'm about halfway into the redo of the project, so we're chugging along, making it happen. But I mean, yeah, it's difficult, and this is something that I was talking about with Ryan the other day. Is that artists? And at first, I thought it was just me, but it's really most artists, most comic artists can shift between irrational self-confidence and irrational self-hatred.
Yeah.
So we're very bipolar in that way of, you know, being very confident in ourselves to being very feeling incapable and like we're an imposter. And, you know, the whole mental health aspect of it is very interesting because of how much it shifts and varies, and it's unpredictable. And a lot of the days you just feel like you can't even draw, and then some days you're like, oh yeah, I'm the best.
Yeah.
You know, it's very interesting for the creative process in that way, because you know, you can't just quit on the days that you feel like you can't draw. And on those days, I usually spend time going back to my roots, studying, finding what inspired me to draw comics. Why do I like comics so much? And spending a lot of time brushing up on my anatomy and my figures and stuff like that. So it is definitely a back and forth process of those two things. So.
Yeah, I remember Mark Silvestri interview where he was saying, like, out of all the work you create, like, if you're an artist and you're a perfectionist, like, you're going to like maybe like 1% of it. And the rest is just going to be, I needed to get it done and make the deadline kind of thing. It's like, I know as somebody, like, obviously I'm in martial arts, but it is an art form, and it's the same thing. You get to be a perfectionist. And with my artwork back there, like, same thing, perfectionism, redrawing things, and getting a little ahead and being like, oh, I should have done it this way. Oh, I can just change it. And it's a constant struggle back and forth for sure. Like, I can feel you on that.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about artists or any creative person, is that we tend to be very perfectionist. We tend to be very controlling of what we want to happen in our work. And even sometimes with even how good John is, sometimes I'll see one little line that's off and I'll ask him, hey, can you go back and change that a little bit? And I feel bad because it's like he can't even see the difference. And I'm like, this thing is bugging me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the 0.01% smallest thing that only I'm going to notice. But if I don't change it, it's going to bug me.
Yeah, that'll be the only thing you can see, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah.
I'm very grateful when he does go back and changes things for me, even though it's the smallest thing.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, how many pages total is Amarok going to be once you're done?
So Amarok is going to be at least 32 pages. I might add in 2 extra pages, but it's definitely going to be 32 pages long. So it's a pretty, sizable book, especially with all the detail and the art that you're going to get.
Nice. And then you bringing in some other artists to do like variant covers and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So if you check out the Indiegogo right now, we have variant covers from David Finch, Rob Willis, and Kanan White, as well as my cover, which I hate now.
Don't do it, Josh. Don't go and redo it. I can already see the wheels turning.
Yeah. But and then Ryan Stegman's going to be doing a cover at some point.
Oh, sweet.
Slam.
It's not like he's busy or anything. I mean, come on.
It's not like he's doing like the biggest comic.
I've been trying to reconnect with that guy for several months because I got to catch up with him. Like we used to hang out online all the time, and then he got, you know, so much work, and it's just been like a snowball rolling downhill ever since, which makes me nothing but happy to see him doing so well. Like that's so cool because I remember when he was like in the stage that you're at right now. So it's just so neat to see, you know, these people who you admire and who you consider friends in the art world, like finally making it. But yeah, once that momentum goes, man, like after Amarok comes out, like you might be surprised. Might be are you prepared for that? Like it's gonna be pretty intense. Like there's already a lot of people talking about you, and I think once that comes out and they really see, like it's gonna be pretty cool. I think it's a good problem to have, if you can even call it a problem, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it'll probably be a little overwhelming, but definitely very exciting to look forward to.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Once it comes out, are you going to kind of shift your focus to starting putting samples together for Marvel and DC and kind of go that route for a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to start putting samples together, going to shows more often, showing my stuff around, really listening to the advice from any editors of what they're looking for in particular and how I can adjust my style towards that direction. So that is the game plan after Amarok is finished.
You kind of think you're gonna adjust, or you're gonna want to keep your own voice, man? It's gonna be hard for you to shift.
Walk the line.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard.
Like Johnny Cash, but
yeah,
because style is always gonna be there. You can't really change it quickly. Style changes like naturally as to come to a personal level, but there are different like fundamental things like storytelling that it doesn't matter what your style is if you can accomplish good storytelling and good compositions and good shots and good character acting and being able to do the boring scenes as well as the exciting scenes.
That's something that Todd always talked about, right?
Yeah, and that's the main stuff that most editors are looking for. So,
well, and some publishers have like what's known as a house style, and it's like kind of want you working this way, and like like Todd would say though, you kind of have to do what's going to get you in the door, and then slowly start creeping in the way that you like to do things too. You know,
I'm ready to sort of do that where I sort of infiltrate and you know, maybe tone it back a little bit, and then once I get my foot in the door, slowly start ramping it back up.
Yeah.
If I need to tone back on my cross hatching or
not break a different inker's psyche if you don't have John on the book that you end up doing.
Exactly. I mean, that's the good thing with John is that I can show these samples and I can be like, hey, if you need an inker, John would do it.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's one of the great things about being friends with John and working with John is that he's a wonderful reference and a wonderful person to have in my contacts.
Good mentor as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been very blessed to have various artists give me advice and mentor me. I mean, you know, Ryan Stegman, David Finch, Brett Booth, those are all my big guys, but they are very willing to give me advice and educate me when they need to. But even guys like Will Robson and Declan Shalvey and, you know, just various different guys. And I think Kyle Hotz even gave me some of the best advice. And even when I went to Comic-Con and I showed my stuff to like Mark Brooks and Jason Sean Alexander, they were all very supportive. So, and so it's really nice to be able to have a community and have working professionals that are willing to talk to me and pay attention to me, because I'm definitely somebody that I'll bug somebody until they talk to me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the personality you have to have.
I see a little bit of Todd in you for sure. I could see you sending out hundreds of emails
Yeah, no, and that's how
if you need to.
I've always been. Yeah, when I was even that's the thing we were talking about earlier is that I take critiques fairly well because I've been putting my stuff out ever since I could upload my art. And if you do it on Reddit, Reddit is brutal.
Dude,
I would have
super brutal.
I would have guys writing multi-paragraph essays about how much I suck
Yeah.
as a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
And so being exposed to that at a young age, nothing can really faze you more than just being brutally ripped apart by strangers on the internet.
See, that's something you have the benefit of coming up with in your generation, though, right?
Yeah,
Like back in the day, somebody might not have had that callus built up from that and might not be able to take the criticism as well because, art being such a special thing to us because it's our creations and it came out of our head, it can be hard to not take it personal even when you're trying to sit there and accept the feedback. And like if you're proud of something and you show it and then it's getting torn up, like it can take you back a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you had that benefit, like Reddit. They're gonna be there's a bunch of savages on there.
Right. Yeah, I don't even bother with it anymore.
I wouldn't.
It's kind of the same way, but yeah, and I mean, I've always been I'm not very special, like, about my art. Like, I don't put it away in any fancy portfolio or anything.
Right.
I just kind of, as soon as I finish it, it goes on the stack next to my floor, and that's it. And I don't even so I'll just toss it on the ground sometimes because it's Bristol board. So it's pretty sturdy, but
Yeah.
I've never been somebody that's super careful with my art, or even and because I've done at least 1,000, if not more, of anatomy studies over the years, gesture studies, perspective studies, all that stuff for me, I could throw that away and I would be just fine because it's all the muscle memory and all the mental memory. And I do all of it. It's gotten to the point where I don't even bother with sketchbooks because they don't have enough pages. They're 40 pages, and I just buy stacks of printer paper.
Oh, there you go.
Do it all over printer paper. That's what I do my studies on all the time.
I wanted to ask you earlier, and I forgot about your process. Are you completely traditional, or are there any of your stages of work that you lay out digitally and then work from there? Like, what's your preference as far as I know, people want to look behind the curtain and kind of know, every artist kind of has their own way of approaching their work, and being in the time that we are, a lot of artists, at least, if they're not completely working digitally, they will have a hybrid workflow where they're laying it out digitally and getting everything correct and then printing it out on the board and finishing it there, or anything like that. So what's your process right now that you've developed that you prefer?
So I am a hyper hybrid artist. I do what I call tradigital.
Tradigital. So, you need to copyright that, dude.
That's what Dan Fraga.
Okay, Fraga came up with it. Fraga boom.
Fraga's
I have one of you can't see it back there, but I have his extreme dog tag that he gave me when I was hanging out with him at a convention back in the day when the shop brought him out, and we connected and really hit it off, and he gave me those when he left, and I still have them, still stay in touch with him to this day. Yeah, super good dude. I like that. It sounds like a term he would come up with.
Yeah. So my process is, I think, probably closest to Ryan Stegman's because that's one of the guys that I've learned from the most. But I will do a thumbnail sketch traditionally on just a piece of printer paper, and I'll play around with different poses, and I'll make adjustments, and sometimes I'll redraw the same pose over and over until I get it the way that I want it to look. And then I will take a picture of that. I will put it on Procreate on my iPad, and I will, put it in 11 by 17 dimensions on the app, and I will knock down the opacity on the picture, and I will do my layouts on top of that. So I will go from a traditional piece of paper to digital layouts, And then I actually go pretty tight with my layouts. Once I get my layout done, I will then print it out on Blue Line, which is usually what an inker would do. They take the digital format and print it out on Blue Line, and that's non-photo reproducible.
Yeah.
I mean, you know all about.
Oh yeah. For the listeners, like, basically you can when you do your final scan or whatever you do, you can tell it to leave out that color, and then you just end up with the pencil or ink lines, and you don't see any of the rough structure drawing or anything that's underneath.
Yeah. So I will print out the Blue Line, and then I will pencil directly on that, and I use a mix of an HB pencil and a 2H pencil. Mainly it's just, I like to use a mechanical pencil, but I also like to use the lead holders that David Finch uses.
Yeah.
So I'll do a mix of that, and then I'll scan it back in, get rid of the Blue Line, and then those are the final pencils. So.
You like that 2H because you don't want it to smudge too much.
Yeah, but I actually do like HB to go in for the line weights.
Okay.
And the cross hatching.
Gotcha.
When you're doing the big shadow shapes, 2H is, that's what I like to use because, like you said, it doesn't smudge.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the certain sharpness that a mechanical pencil has.
Yeah.
And then I'll actually take a piece of paper and put it under my hand using the mechanical pencil. And it's just very easy to go in and do all my little cross hatching and any line weights that I need to thicken up that way. So yeah, it's all about finding the process and finding what works best for your workflow and what speaks the most to you.
Awesome, man. Yeah, finding our own voice and going down that path, being open to the critiques and the advice of others. Like, yeah, I'm just impressed with what a wise young man you are. 19 years old, going on 40. That's good, man. Don't lose that. That's great. I can tell that your mind is always working.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's sort of the philosophy I try to live by is Kaizen, which is always learning, always progressing. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's a very martial arts thing.
It is.
People.
Yeah, that's the term that's used a lot. Yep.
You got to apply. And when you can apply the drive that you have to sports, working out, martial arts, etc., to art, that's really when you start to see improvement and your determination kick in, because those fields are very high adrenaline. And when you can apply it to art, even though you're just kind of sitting there drawing, you got to have that very determined mindset, because art is one of the most mentally taxing things that you can do. And that's the thing that they always tell you with any sort of physical labor, is that the mental part is harder than the physical part. Because
100%.
Your body can do it. It's just your brain has to have the motivation and determination, and to do it when you're not even motivated. And that's really when, discipline and everything is important. So to make sure that you're always learning and never growing stale, and always having an open mind, and even, Bruce Lee, you have to be like water.
Yep.
And not, conform to any one solid shape, but be able to change and to the circumstances and adapt, because I'm a big advocate for everybody trying to learn how to draw, and I'm a big advocate for drawing being a bigger part of the education system, because all that drawing is problem solving. You have a blank piece of paper, you need to put something on that paper, and that has like a billion solutions that you could do. And as soon as you choose something, well, you need to make sure the anatomy is right, the perspective, the proportions, and it is this whole long list of an infinite amount of problems that you need to solve. And it's all cognitive, and it's all, you're doing it subconsciously almost. And a lot of what's taught in school is to follow a very linear step 1, step 2, step 3, step.
A lot of memorization and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is an important part of drawing, but the main part of drawing is being able to do it in an organic way, where you can take the context of what you've learned and apply it without having to sit there and say, okay, first I'm going to draw a circle, then I'm going to draw another circle. You just have to be able to go on the go and do it all kinesthetically and learn that way. So
well said, my friend. I can't think of a better way to end the podcast off than that. Why don't you tell everybody where they can follow you on social media, all the different outlets? Obviously, we already talked about Amarok being on Indiegogo and everything. Tell people where they can find you on the gram, as you kids say.
Yeah, so I primarily use Instagram and Twitter, or if you want to call it X.
Yeah.
I do have a Facebook. I don't like using Facebook because I don't care for the interface, but I'll be on there sometimes. My Instagram is joshua.derstine, and my Twitter is still the Art Jedi. But if you do look up Joshua Derstine on Twitter, you will be able to find my stuff. And then my Facebook is also just Joshua Derstine. So if you can remember my last name, and you can remember,
and don't say it wrong.
Derstine,
yeah, exactly.
you'll be able to find me anywhere.
Don't screw it up like I did, guys.
If you just Google Joshua Derstine, you can find everything in the Indiegogo. If you want to find Amarok, all you got to do is Google Amarok Indiegogo or Amarok Comic, and or Amarok Joshua Derstine, and you should be able to find the page, and you can check it out and see if it's something that interests you. It's still available to pre-order. I cannot promise how soon I'll get it delivered to you, but it is there if you want to support it and get it at some point when it is completely finished and revamped. And, you know, even though production has taken a while, you will be getting a cool comic. So
awesome. Definitely support this guy. You won't regret it. I will include all that information in the show notes and the description on the YouTube video and everything for your guys' convenience. Josh, I'm going to hit the outro music here. Vibe with me a little bit. I don't know what your dance moves are like. Will Robson put up some crazy, like I don't have any dance moves. I'm pretty basic. You know, you can bob your head or whatever, but until next time, everybody, keep it nerdy. Come on, at least you got to at least have fist pump. Oh, there you go. That reminds me of the Saturday Night Live, was the the head bobbing, Will Ferrell, and and Will was doing some kind of thing like this, and the eyebrows and this. I mean, maybe it's a English thing, something from England.